So this past weekend, I was asked to present a legal segment at a concealed handgun class. And after the class was over, I was approached by a young lady with what I thought was a pretty unique question that I've never had somebody ask me before. She works as a massage therapist and had once been placed in a position of discomfort, let's say, and had some questions about what her legal rights might be in responding to that sort of threat. And so I thought today it might be a good idea to address the topic of personal service workers and how you might want to think about your own self-defense when you're working off-site, perhaps in a client's home or in a client's place of business. Let's get into that. Welcome back to West Virginia Gun Law. I'm attorney Todd Lenieve.
I'm Dave Janssen.
And as most of you may know, Dave is a good buddy of mine who is a law officer with a local department and occasionally joins me on the channel to talk about issues. And I thought this was a topic that might be kind of interesting to get a policeman's perspective on, in addition to talking about the legal side of things. And so today I wanted to talk about personal service workers, people who go into someone else's home or place of business. Maybe it's the massage therapist that approached me with the question. Maybe it's a home healthcare worker of some sort. Right. Maybe a house cleaning service.
Real estate.
Yeah, real estate agents. Not necessarily going into a customer's home, but maybe it is going into a client's home to, take a look at a home that they're going to be listing. The point is, people who may be, by the nature of what it is they're doing, are in a little more vulnerable position. Yeah. They're away from their home base. They're away from the things that they may have structured to keep themselves safe on the job. And they're, to some extent, really at the mercy of the people that they are there to serve. As in the case of this young lady who was working at a spa at the time. This was, a regular mainstream business. And in the course of providing massage therapy services to a customer, a gentleman decided he was looking for something a little extra and grabbed her hand and he moved it towards his crotch, and she quickly was able to pull away from him and exit the room. Obviously, that's a sexual assault.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It may not be the type of sexual assault that would justify a deadly force response. No. In that setting, anyway. But it's certainly a sexual assault. And so her question to me was, what if something like that was to happen again? And she's now working on her own, has her own practice. She has a business location, but she does also offer on-site services. And so her question to me was, how can I protect myself? And I thought, it's probably a good idea to revisit the law of self-defense under West Virginia law. Look at the elements real quickly, and I've done a couple of videos on this in the past, but talk about your right to protect yourself outside of your home, your place of business, anywhere that's a place you have a legal right to be.
Right.
And so, under the law, the way the state of West Virginia defines it, you have several elements to a self-defense claim that have to be established before a court can make a determination whether or not you're going to be allowed to argue self-defense. Right. So first you have this idea of innocence, meaning you have no wrongdoing in the encounter. In this case, there wasn't some solicitation for, hey, for an extra $50 we can, have you leave with a smile on your face. Innocence. Imminence, which relates to the immediacy of the threat that you're facing as the defender. Reasonableness, both subjective and objective, meaning in your mind you reasonably perceived a threat and that you had to do something to respond to it. That's subjective. And objectively, another person in your shoes would have seen it the same way. And then the next, and I think in a situation like this that she described, very important point is proportionality, relating to the position of the aggressor and defender, as well as the threat that's presented and the response that's made to that threat. And so, in a case like that, there's really not a deadly threat. Yes, it's a sexual assault, certainly.
Absolutely.
But it's not a threat that would have placed her in fear, at least reasonably placed her in fear of death or serious bodily harm.
Exactly.
So, of course, that's the standard for triggering the right to use deadly force in response. And so what I told her was, it might be in a situation like that worthwhile to keep a can of pepper spray among the lotions and other things that she uses, her supplies, while she's doing the work. And if somebody was to make an overt move like that on her again, if she felt that the only way she could stop that encounter would be a quick pepper spray, well, that's a non-lethal response.
Correct. Yes.
And you as a pepper spray instructor and a guy who has also used pepper spray on real people, it's pretty effective mostly, isn't it?
It's very effective, and especially if the individual has that sort of intent, I'm pretty sure it would take the fire right out of them and introduce a new kind of fire.
Right.
Actually. So.
Yeah, this is not the fire that burns down below. This would be the fire that burns right in the face.
Yeah.
So,
enjoy that for the next 2 days.
Right. So, in a situation like that, I think she would have been completely justified if she wasn't able to simply pull away from this guy and be able to leave the room. She probably could have gone to pepper spray, and I don't think there would have been any problem with that legally from my perspective. What do you think?
If she's able to extract herself from the situation, that's one thing.
Right.
But as you stated, like, had he refused to let go or continue to encroach upon her, then yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we sort of furthered that discussion, distinguishing this type of sexual assault versus the type of sexual assault that both Dave and I have dealt with in our careers that is the sort of thing that places somebody's life at risk or places them in a position where they may suffer serious bodily harm. And those are the standards under our law that allow consideration of use of deadly force in response.
That's the thing with pepper spray, though, too, and I just want to throw that out there. Pepper spray is an excellent tool for giving yourself time or escaping from a situation. It's probably not going to, stop the situation. Let me rephrase. It's not something that I would spray somebody and just hang out and check on them to see if they're okay. In that particular instance, I would pepper spray them and I would get out the door, leave my stuff behind, whatever's necessary. That's from a civilian side. From the police side, obviously, that's to give us an angle to do further action. Not really to take somebody into custody. It's to weaken the situation in a less violent way, less lethal.
Where you have somebody who's being non-compliant.
Correct.
Every other method of trying to get their cooperation has failed.
So
and they're escalating, so you need to escalate yourself. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah. That for civilian use, the idea here is what can I do with the least amount of force, the least intrusive type of response to get myself to safety. And that's, as a civilian, always the goal. Get yourself to safety. And so, again, for somebody else working in a home setting or in an office setting, somebody else's office, have that pepper spray. Have something like that handy. Have a little stun gun. The little cheap things you can find at gun shows or whatever, and something that you can jolt somebody if you can't gain separation from them physically otherwise.
Well, and something like that, time is of essence, right? If this item is far away from you, it does no good. You need to have it close to your persons in some way.
Right. Right.
This particular instance that you bring up, had she left and then came back with the pepper spray that she kept in her car and then sprayed them, then it becomes more of a revenge type thing. You didn't have to reintroduce yourself back into the situation.
And in that scenario, I think very clearly she would have lost this angle of innocence potentially.
Yeah.
Certainly imminence is gone because she's able to leave the encounter, go retrieve a tool of some sort, come back to the encounter. That's not what our self-defense law looks at. And so in that instance, she wouldn't have been able to claim self-defense. It's got to be right then, right now, because that threat is imminent. Yeah. Whether it's a deadly threat or a non-deadly threat, you still have a right to protect yourself. And so, I think that's a great point, that you've got to be prepared in the moment to be able to make the response that you have to make in a proportional manner.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And so it's interesting, from the perspective of personal service workers. We also see right now a lot of stuff going on in the world. We've got this Iranian conflict happening, and there's a lot of talk about sleeper cells. And the simple fact is, with the tens of millions of illegal immigrants who've come into this country over the last, who knows how many years, 6, 8 years, whatever it's been. there is, I think, a fair concern for discussion as to whether or not things like that are here. And when we see instances of violence, all across the country on a fairly regular basis, and suddenly you see people of particular nationalities or from certain parts of the world that are involved in these, you begin to wonder: is there some credence to this idea of sleeper cells here that are looking to wage a very different kind of warfare than we've ever seen? Bringing it to the streets, kind of one small pocket at a time. And so again, if you would ever find yourself in a situation like that, outside of your home, and again, somewhere that you're legally allowed to be, that same set of standards applies. The same legal standards apply in terms of how you can protect yourself. And I think it's kind of interesting. It doesn't really matter what the threat is, whether it's some pervert who's trying to get his jollies, or whether it's somebody who's got a political ideology behind their aggression. You have a right to protect yourself. And under the law of this state, you don't have to become a victim before you can defend yourself. And that's something that I get a lot of questions about. Do I have to get shot at first? Do I have to get hit first? Do I have to be stabbed first? And the answer is no. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't fully understand. We have a right to proactively protect ourselves.
Well, it's a sliding scale. I mean, you would have to be compared to a reasonable person that would be in fear of imminent danger, death, bodily harm. And that not everybody feels the same way. You know what I mean? Right. But in a situation like that, I guess where I'm going with this is the pepper spray versus the firearms scenario, right? You don't take a pepper spray to a gunfight. That's just not going to work out for you.
Right. In
this kind of situation, where we're saying you don't have to be a victim, right? People could have different issues, like perhaps a disability or something like that, to where they're more likely to feel a victim as opposed to a 26-year-old testosterone-filled man that lives in a gym, right? So I mean, it's that sliding scale, I guess, is what I'm talking about.
And that's really where we get into the analysis of proportionality. Proportionality relates not just to deadly force versus non-deadly force, but it relates to the relative position of the aggressor and the defender. And so, proportionality is definitely a big deal, and it absolutely can shape the way a self-defense scenario unfolds, and consequently the way a self-defense case unfolds. Well, folks, thanks for joining us for this conversation here today. And it's an interesting topic. Like I said, I'd never been presented with that kind of a question before, and thought, it's worth sitting down and sort of talking about it and giving you guys something to think about. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, please drop them in the comments section below. Appreciate you jumping in and watching this with us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet already, would love to have you do so. Join us for the ride here. Like, share the video. That helps us get around the anti-good guy algorithm that seems to exist on this platform. And getting this information out certainly is helpful. Appreciate you guys being here. Thanks a lot. We will see you the next time around. Until then, take care and stay safe.